So we are here on I'd Like to Go There podcast. Today we're going to be talking about intercultural relationships. We don't say interracial relationships. We don't do that. That's passe, and it doesn't matter anyway. It's about culture. So today we're going to be getting into it. I got two of my favorite people here with me. We got Chap. We got Abby. Let's go. I want y'all to go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about you. Abby, ladies first.
Okay. So my name is Abby Edmonson, and I am an artist, a business owner, and I'm married to this guy.
My name is Chap Edmonson. I am also an artist, and I'm an operations director for a nonprofit Episcopal church.
Is that how you guys were able to get together? You guys connected at the artist level?
Actually, there was an organization I was working for previously, St. John's downtown, and there was a nonprofit sector kind of attached to that. So she was working for the nonprofit sector, and I was working for the church. And kind of by happenstance, we met, but didn't hit it off immediately.
Oh.
And then I think about 2 years later, we actually started dating.
So when you say you didn't hit it off immediately, explain a little bit more. So you guys met, and it was just like, I don't like him. And what was it?
I think it was just weird timing first.
Okay.
I was new to the city, and we met at like a luncheon after he had worked all day, so he was pretty tired. And I was acting out of character, I think, in some ways, because I was nervous and trying to get to know people in the city, asking a lot of questions, which is his most favorite thing ever. And hanging out and getting to know each other, and definitely were intrigued by one another. And that's the very condensed, quick, short story.
Okay. And is that how you experienced it?
Yeah, I think when we first met that first day, it was her first day in the city. I was very tired, did not feel like talking. She asked a lot of questions. I was not here for it. And so I think she had a perception of who I was, I had a perception of who she was.
Okay.
And I think we just kind of held on to that perception over the next couple of years. Okay. And it was a mutual friend of all of ours that we ended up dating. He kind of threw a softball pitch after I was doing a filming for something, and we needed a person to cast for a specific role. And so we needed a young white female.
Got it.
And I was like, I know a young white female. And so she was like, man, I don't do this kind of stuff. I don't really want to do this. And afterwards, he was like, well, Chap will buy you a bottle of wine.
10 years later.
10 years? Oh, okay. So a bottle of wine. That was a nice touch, Chap. Very nice touch. Very nice touch there. So what sold you, Abby? Was it the first date?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I think we like to use the word intrigued a lot because we were very curious about each other. We come from very different places, and I think after our first date, I was super curious about him and wanted to know him more.
Okay.
But I also was just going through a lot of healing at that time from a past relationship and was very cautious.
Okay.
So it took a couple more months for us to really connect and be on the same page. I just felt a sense of calmness with him.
Peace.
And peace. And I thought that he was a really good listener and really thoughtful with his questions and with his words, and was really attracted to him as well. And so I think it was just, I don't know, just the curiosity of wanting to get to know him on a deeper level that really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where are you guys from? I know you mentioned you said totally different backgrounds. Where are you from originally?
Georgia.
Yeah. Atlanta or
outside of Atlanta.
Okay. I'm not
We laugh because I just tell people I'm from Atlanta because it's easier. But I grew up in northeast Atlanta, northeast of Atlanta, and the suburbs. Kind of rural area. Not a lot of diversity.
Okay.
So it was just very different worlds that we grew up in.
How about you?
I'm on the east side of Houston,
Okay.
from a neighborhood called Pleasantville. So I'm born and raised here in the city. And the Atlanta thing is one. She told me she was from Atlanta. I was like, okay, cool. And the first time going back to meet her folks, we hit the airport and then drove an hour north. You ain't from Atlanta. That's people from here saying they from Houston, they from Katy or College Station or something.
Woodlands. The
Woodlands. That ain't Houston.
Gotcha. Okay. And you said it wasn't a lot of diversity. Is this your first experience with dating someone of a different culture than you, or?
Not my first experience, but it's never, so just thinking back to like childhood, it was very much not something my parents were super accepting of. I definitely had crushes and I dated, but there were certain moments just through that very formative time in my like, upbringing of where there was like times where it was like, no, that's not okay. No, you're not allowed to date this guy because of the color of his skin or because of something that he believes. This, I will say, is my first like very like serious ongoing. Once we had been dating for a while, we told my parents, and I mean that's definitely a whole story within of itself. But yeah, this was the first like serious relationship that I've had outside of, you know.
Does it scare you at all that this is the first serious relationship that is outside of your culture?
No. I think at the beginning there were definitely like questions that we both had, and definitely just knew that there was a lot we had to like, process through and a lot that we had to probably come up against, particularly from just my side of the family. But him and who he was and what we were creating together never made me feel uncomfortable or scared or nervous because I was getting to know him and I trusted him and I felt very safe with him. Yeah.
When did you know he was the one?
That's a good question. Definitely before he knew, I think. I think in probably a couple years. We had a lot of like just things to like work through. Just interpersonally, but also again with my family. And so I think honestly through like the trials and tribulations that we went through with my family, it only confirmed more to me that he was my person because of the way that he was so gracious and loving towards particularly my dad. And I just, because I was so frustrated and angry, but he was nothing but generous and kind and loving. And I think that's when I really was just like, this is the kind of person that I want to be with. This is like the kind of love that I want to be and create a family with. And so I think just over time, I don't know if there was like a distinct moment where I was like, this is my person. Because we talk about that a lot of how like love is a choice and you actively are choosing that person.
Right.
And throughout that process, I just was like seeing his nature and who he was and who he showed up to be, even in times of hardship and times of when we were in probably the thick of it and it was difficult, and there could have been so many moments where he was like, nope, this is too hard, this is too complicated, it's too messy, I'm gonna walk away. But he leaned in instead of pulling away, and that's what really made me just fall in love with him, I believe.
I understand that. Safety, peace of mind, you gotta have it. And how about you, Chap? When it came down to saying this is the woman that I want to be with, well, actually, let me back up. Upbringing.
Yeah.
We're on the southeast side of Houston.
East side.
East side of Houston. Yes, correct me. And tell me about your atmosphere.
So Pleasantville was, especially in the late 80s and 90s, typical like what you see in the movies, that kind of spot. It was so much stuff that I didn't realize wasn't normal until like later in life when I wanted to start going to therapy of like, oh, that's not normal. People don't deal with this like every day.
Right. And explain the dysfunction that you're talking about.
You know, like we live right by a bus stop, so finding crack pipes on the corner, or like, you know, my mom was one of the only people from her class going to Fur High School that like got a degree and had a job. So everybody who got strung out would come to our doorstep to try to get money.
Oh, wow.
So knocks on the door at 2 a.m. or like cops were trolling the street by foot. We call them jump out boys. It's a lot of stuff that you just don't know. It became normal for me. It was normalized, but it wasn't normal. You know? So my mom did a really good job with me and my brothers of keeping us protected though.
Okay.
Like, you know, it's like, you're not gonna be in the streets because we lost my oldest brother to the streets. You know, he was in the penitentiary. No, not dead, just he's in the penitentiary by 18.
But still, yeah.
In and out, and still really don't have a relationship with him because he was gone. But that was just our upbringing. But my mom was a really headstrong person, and so my dad was out of the picture, so it was my mom raising 2 boys on the east side, and she was like, look, I don't really care get an education, don't get nobody pregnant, and
Never.
like strict rules. That was it.
Right.
Call me if you're gonna be out late. That was kind of the box.
Gotcha.
Outside of that, I trust you. Just don't embarrass me. Don't do no stupid shit out here.
You fine.
Okay, I was like, what's my parameters
You're
here?
good.
Okay.
You're good.
Yeah, so that was the parameters for my mom. She's like strong Black woman who went up against a lot in the city, just kind of in her position, the first Black woman to do a lot of stuff in the city
Wow.
for the fire department on her level, but she just kind of was no nonsense and some stuff. So that was just kind of our upbringing. It's like education first, respect and treat women, don't get nobody pregnant, and don't go to jail.
Has she ever had the discussion with you regarding dating outside your culture?
Yeah, she would say it differently though. I think at a point she kind of did the trope of like, if she can't use your comb, don't bring her home. Yeah, but I think she led by example. So she did, like I watched how she politicked the rooms and how she was able to navigate situations, and so I knew that where her heart was, and so I thought that it would be an issue.
Right.
But I knew it wouldn't be an issue. My mom was kind of like, anybody I dated, she didn't care. And it wasn't real until I told her it was real. Outside of that, she's like, you playing.
Gotcha.
Like, you just out here, you just playing.
Right.
So it didn't matter who it was I brought. If I was serious about it, she would take it seriously. So yeah, I thought that there would be some issues there, mostly with my sisters.
Mm-hmm.
But my mom, I didn't really think that there would be an issue there.
So there was no issue. That's awesome. I think that's a testament to the type of woman that she is. Clearly, she's able to walk into any room. You have some people who's able to eat at any table, is what they say. So you can go to the crack house and speak, or you can go to the White House.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
She was definitely that person. She is not afraid to sit at any table and feel like she belongs there.
that's awesome.
And that's how she raised us. It's like, you don't walk into a room and feel like you less than. You belong in any room that you're in. So that's just kind of how we always move through the world.
Gotcha. Now, I know you mentioned that there was a lot of, strife and kind of, contention that happened with the family. How did they accept him when you did bring him home?
There was, I felt, where do we even start? There was just like a lot of conversations that happened even before they met Chap.
Yeah.
I just let them know because I knew that this was something that had been an issue in the past, and I just was like, here's the thing, here's what's happening. And so we just started that conversation there, just like over the phone, took there in Georgia. And I don't even honestly quite remember why or how they ended up coming to Houston for a visit, but they did. Mm-hmm. And we all went to dinner and they met Chap. And I remember my dad being like, he's like 100 times the man of your ex-boyfriend or something. Ooh. Or like, he was like, he's really great. And him and my dad have a lot in common just with hobbies and like passions and like interests, and like they both really love film, and so like there was like that connection there, and so my dad was able to like talk with him really easily. But despite all of that, it was really a thing that my dad and my mom at the beginning, she came around much faster. Yes. Just the color of his skin, they just like couldn't seem to get past that he was a Black man.
What is their concern? What was the inherent concern?
I don't even know if they could say it. They just like kept kind of like, I don't even know if they knew. They just like, I think because my dad born and raised in Alabama, my mom in Georgia. But the thing that was so, I think, conflicting for my dad is because he's always been a super empathetic and like very compassionate person, and like very much like moved by injustices, but like he couldn't somehow seem to like make sense of his daughter being with a Black man. And he tried, at some points there were like talks around like couldn't rationalize it around with like religion, and there was just like this spiraling of sorts, and it didn't make sense. It wasn't rational. I think that sometimes it was out of fear, maybe for what we might come against.
So when you say religion, how was he trying to piece together the religion or trying to rationale? I don't understand that.
I think he was just it's using religion in a sense of like, we're supposed to stay in our lanes, essentially. Be with our race, be with our culture, and shouldn't be this. And for me, it didn't make a lot of sense.
Is that the background?
No. So we grew up like non-denominational, and then like Southern Baptist, and then like Methodist. We didn't have like a specific denomination, but I think my dad is like, in some ways, it's a fundamentalism and like indoctrinated into that kind of. And you have to keep in mind, like, I think the worldview is very small in a lot of ways.
Right.
Where they live currently, it's primarily white, conservative. My dad doesn't travel a whole lot. He's like a homebody.
Okay.
And so I think all those have factored into his worldview and how he experiences the world, not to give excuses, because there was so many like frustrating times. And I think like at some point you have to like reconcile with your thoughts and your beliefs. And I think like by Chap and I being together, he was having to be confronted by that, and he was not ready.
Gotcha.
And so I think he didn't have an answer, and he didn't have a reason for why he felt that way. And so it was coming out in weird ways and explanations. I have a sister and a brother who were really supportive from the beginning. And even my sister was like, this religion stuff is kind of bullshit that you're saying. Like, this makes zero sense, especially if you're thinking about, I don't know, just like there's just, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was a really difficult, like, 2 years? It felt like
2 years.
Maybe 3.
maybe 3, where it was just like, we kept coming back to this place of like talking and lashing it out, and, you know, very much like fighting for Chap and I, because at that point I was like, I think like this is going to be like my person. Like, we're going to get married. We've talked about it.
Sure.
And one thing that my dad and I specifically committed to during that time is coming back to our love for one another,
yes,
despite this conflict and this like point where it felt like we were on total opposite ends of what we believed. And we've always kind of politically and like some way socially have really butted heads over the past few years, because just from, you know, growing up and just figuring out who I am is very different from how I grew up and the things that I believe.
Okay. Was there ever a time where you just flat out called that out?
Come
on now.
Yeah.
It was some real uncomfortable Christmases.
Yeah.
Uh,
It was, yeah. And like Chap was, yeah, it was uncomfortable. And he said, really gracious. And he
Yes.
could have been so unloving and hateful
yes.
and rightly, like, I was like, why are you not more mad? There was a time where me and my dad were talking, and he ran out of the house, and I was super pissed, and I don't think I've ever been that angry with my dad, because it just was like, this makes no sense. You're being completely irrational. Like, and for him to have raised me and my sister and my brother to be loving and open and accepting of people, you're literally like being the opposite of everything you've taught us to be. And yeah, it was really uncomfortable. And there were so many times where we didn't talk for a while. But I think our love for one another kept bringing us and drawing us back to one another.
Yeah.
It made it difficult for my mom and my dad, because my mom came, you know, around, and I think she always has been very like open, but I think the way she was brought up too, she just, I don't know. I think sometimes I
think they were scared.
And I think if you're not like confronted with the thing, you're not gonna ever face it.
Right.
They had no other time in their life where they're being confronted with this thing right in their face and their family and what's happening, which I'm like, it shouldn't even be a thing, but they're making it a thing. But there was fear.
So they got exposure therapy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like in the same way, we can say like, you know, we would be so open with whatever our child chooses to be and whoever they choose to be. But at the same time, your child is going to choose something, like fall in love with a robot or AI. You can be like, that shit ain't a person. Like, I can't accept this stuff, right? Because it's something that's going to butt up against whatever it is your core fundamental value.
Right.
And, you know, it's up to you as a parent, which, you know, kudos to your dad, to keep coming back to your child and saying, oh, I love you, I trust you. What am I not seeing here?
Right.
And I think that was my biggest thing, is like, I knew her dad had raised 3 amazing individuals, in her sister, and her brother.
Right.
And knowing that, okay, you're a good person.
Right.
You've never disrespected me to my face.
Right.
It's just this thing you can't get past. So I know you're a good person. I know you're a good man.
Right.
So I'm not going to come at you with any kind of animosity. I'm not angry at you. I know that this is just your upbringing and your fear.
Right.
So I'm just going to keep showing up as who I am, and we're going to be okay.
But what do you think that fear is? What is that fear?
It's the same fear that like my mom had for me, where she wanted me to go and be an engineer, and I chose something different, right? I want to set you up for the best possible future where you don't have any issues, or like I can make the road as smooth as possible for you.
So is the fear that she's not going to be financially supported? Is the fear that she's not going to be emotionally supported? What do you think that fear is?
I think the fear was you're choosing something that's going to make your life more difficult because of their worldview.
Right.
If we lived in Snellville, Georgia, we would get really uncomfortable looks all the time.
Well,
Which we do when we go.
So, Chap.
Yeah.
Do you get looks from Black women when you are out with Abby?
She does too.
Have you ever had anyone who was disrespectful, Abby, that just like came up to him and...
No one's ever, not that I remember, has come up to you and been disrespectful.
Okay. But the looks.
But yeah, definitely have had some like I remember one woman like literally like come and stood like where I was in like at her face, or she was at my face, and like kind of just gave me a real unapproving look and then like walked off. We were at a Warehouse Live to see Gary Cook Jr. It was that concert. We were standing in line for something. You don't remember that? That's the only one I ever remember. I remember when and where.
We see it. Okay. But you didn't see it.
I didn't see that particular one. I can't recall that one.
That's the only one that distinctly, like, because it was like very obvious. And I was like, okay.
What do you think is behind that?
I think it's like maybe just like the choice of like, why is he choosing a white woman? Or why, like, I mean, I don't know, honestly. I think it's just like I mean, I know that there's like a story around like, you know, maybe she can be like handled better, or she's more like, I don't know, easier to maintain, or like that stereotype, but I don't know if that's where it's like coming
So
from.
I was just talking to somebody about that today. And when I tell you, my theory is that I don't believe that women of other cultures are docile in any of it. I keep hearing this narrative, you know, that happens. It's just like, oh, people, you know, date outside your race, oh, they're so, date outside your culture, oh, they're just so much more submissive, and, you know, they're more docile, and they're, you know, more willing to take things. I'm just like, I don't know what women know, because women I know who are outside of my culture are very strong women. They don't take no mess, and they're not docile by far.
It's absolutely not true.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you can confirm.
I think sometimes the trope is that like it's easier,
Right.
and you made the choice because it's easier.
Do you feel that was the reason why you made the choice?
No.
So what made Abby the one?
The choice was we connected. He said there was something that I think drew us to one another that was beyond physical.
Right.
Because we weren't each other's types.
Right.
Like, you know, it was more so like, in our conversation, there was something spiritually that was connecting us in a way that we were able to talk about really hard stuff and figure it out, because we do come from such different cultures.
Right.
That like early on in our relationship, we had many nights where we would stay up talking, trying to figure stuff out, just because I was like, I don't get it. Help me get it.
Yes.
And we were patient and kind with one another in that kind of way.
Yeah.
And that had more to do with just, I think, us being at the same place spiritually at the same time. Because she was coming out of a relationship where she was still healing. Right. I had been doing a lot of healing work where I was finally ready for something different.
Gotcha.
And we just were connecting on that kind of level.
And is Abby your first experience outside of your culture?
I've dated biracial before, but never just purely white. Even some of the culturally, I think is a big important thing, right? Because I know white girls that grew up in the same culture as me,
right?
So it's different. Mm-hmm. Abby's from a different culture.
Right.
We can listen to music now, and
but
it's different, right? Okay. So like my upbringing, stuff I listen to, she's never heard of, and vice versa. she can play some stuff for me. Like, this reminds me of high school. And I'm like,
Not high school.
nah, I don't know that. So it's different culturally, not just race.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a hard question.
Yeah.
So Abby, have you ever heard of the talk?
The talk.
The talk. Are you familiar with when I say the talk?
Which talk?
I know. I'm
We
like,
get a couple of talks now.
Okay. So
can you give us more
absolutely,
insight?
absolutely. So when and if you do decide to have children,
Mhm.
have we had a discussion around the talk?
Of how they identify.
Not about how they identify, but more so how they're going to be perceived.
We've had that conversation before.
Yeah.
And I think I can talk from my standpoint. What I come from a basis of is no matter what skin color they have,
Mhm.
they will be perceived as a Black American. You're going to be perceived as a Black person.
Yes.
And so there's certain things that I can help them with, and certain things that Abby won't be able to help them with,
Mhm.
because she's never been able to identify or like understand what it's like to be a Black person in America. And so we've had that conversation around like there's some stuff that you're gonna get really frustrated and fired up about.
Right.
That like for me it's just like, look, that's just. And so there are certain things that will be difficult because they want to identify both ways, right? So they want to know both cultures,
Mhm.
and so we want to expose them to both, but like help them understand. Cool,
Right.
but this is how you're going to be labeled and treated.
Got
And however good it gets for you, still know that at any moment it can be snatched from you because of this in this country. So
Yeah.
we've had that talk, and you may have different things to say about that.
No, we were on the same page about that.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got two more questions, and then I know we'll be wrapping up. So, question for you, Abby: when, let's say, if Chap gets pulled over, you're in the car, the cop tells him to exit the vehicle. No reason why. What's your next move?
I have thought about this a lot, and it's always hard to know what you are going to do in that moment.
Yeah.
But I am already like getting like fired up just like sitting here.
Yeah.
And I think not to escalate the situation, but to figure out like what is happening in that moment.
Mhm.
And like Chap, we always joke around like that white woman power and like saying like what that is and when to use it. And I think I would use it in that moment to be like, what
Thank
is
you for the honesty.
yeah, I think like there's just moments where I feel like you have to acknowledge who you are and like, how the world sees you. And Chap and I have talked a lot about this with like the way the world views white women.
Right.
And I think that there are moments, and I will use that if I'm like fighting, because that makes me nervous,
Right.
knowing the history with police brutality, particularly within Black men, but Black women as well. And if I'm in the car, I will fight and raise hell if there is anything that is going sideways
Mhm.
with him, because he is my first priority and I will protect him at all costs if anything I can do. So if that means like turning on that crazy white woman, then I will do that. But also just I and we talk about that too, of just like being aware of the situation and not escalating and being like thoughtful in that moment.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, that makes me nervous and scared, and I hope that if that ever happens, and I hope it doesn't, I hope that I know what to do in that moment and that I can say and do the right thing to protect him in any way.
Because, like, for instance, we've had to call emergency, like 911 before,
Yes.
and I'm always like, you call 911
Interesting.
because we'll get a response faster. And so when our house was on fire, she was like, call 911. I was like, can you call them? Just because, there'll be a different response time. And we had somebody who had broken into our garage, and we thought he was still in there. And so we needed to call the laws. And so I was like, yo, you call them. And when they showed up, they came out, guns out.
And
that's one of the times where she was like, yo, you get behind me, so I'll be in front. So when they show up, they won't think that you're the intruder. They'll know, okay, he's with me. And so it's a weird dynamic to kind of have that, like when the cops are involved.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yo, you go first. But it actually adds a layer of safety because it was a white cop that showed up and a woman, and she had her gun out, and she looked at me and looked at Abby, and she was like, "Oh, no, that's not the threat."
Well, and I just, in that moment, I was like, I think you need to go inside. You go, and like, I will talk to her, because you can, I don't know, just from news and the things that have been going on for so long, but just recent events this was like a year and a half ago or something. It was just like, in that moment, you could see how things could go sideways so fast.
Right.
And I think like in those moments, it's just like, oh my gosh, like let me like talk and like kind of be in front, because again, there's this privilege that comes with being a white woman in America. And if in those moments I can use that to shield him from whatever might happen, which is outrageous and unfair with the world that we live in, then I would like, yes.
Wow, that's good. We're gonna end on that note, but that's beautiful. I love the protection aspect of it, and one of the things that I would want for my son as a black man, no matter who he's with, is precisely that, because that matters. It's the protection of it all, and that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So thank you guys so much again for coming. So, we got Abby, we got Chap, we got I Like to Go there. We went there. So we thank you guys again. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And we'll check in with y'all.